Welcome everyone. Today in this video we'll talk about the responses during emergencies, responses during disaster. So, uh, what exactly is emergencies? Emergencies or disasters are something which was unwarranted, uninvited, exigencies which happens in our daily life, probably in our work life also. Now, this how do we deal with them? How do we cope with this unwanted, unplanned event that has happened? And there are a plentiful of emergencies or disasters waiting to happen. Let's say there are something are man-made in terms of terrorism, uh, probably because there's a short circuit, there's a fire in your office, probably because it's a natural made in terms of earthquake, in terms of tsunami or flood. How do we exactly deal with emergencies, perhaps disaster there were? So sources of information for this particular presentation, I have just accumulated it from all the emergency services that is available in a modern day society. We call about ambulance services. We talk about fire and rescue, the police services, the environmental protection agencies, the work health and safety regulators. This is very important. OSHA, as we are usually known as Occupational Safety and Hazard Analysis, local council, probably your provincial governmental members, local administrative issues, state emergency services, electricity suppliers, gas suppliers, poison information centers, probably when we have certain medical emergency because of poison, somebody might have inhaled some sort of chemicals, let's say, or there's a snake bite perhaps, or there has been pertinent or deliberate intervention in your biological system by external agents. And then we have something called trauma counseling centers, as the case might be. Now, these are the sources of information that is there. So managing a typical emergency, how do we go across with it? There are basically four steps to it: preventions, preparation, response, and recovery. Let us analyze and study all these four steps of prevention, prevention of emergency, which probably we would love to do it, but in evidently as has been defined by an emergency or disaster, it is unwarranted, unexpected, uninvited event that happens. So probably if it is happens, we are not able to prevent it. What goes wrong? Can we prepare for it? If yes, can we prepare for unwarranted, uninvited events? What should be appropriate response? And post the event, can we plan it in a better fashion? And that is what recovery is all about it. So prevention and mitigation. Prevention is an action taken to decrease the overall probability of that event happening. Can we reduce that probability? Mitigation is an actions to eliminate or probably even reduce the loss of life and property damages related to an event, crisis, particularly to those that cannot be prevented. Prevention and mitigation is achieved through the application of risk management process. Preparedness. Preparedness takes the form of a plan or procedure designed to save the lives and minimum damages when such emergency happens. Now, how do we go across with it? Objective of the emergency plan is to prevent fatalities and injuries, reduce damages to the building, stocks, equipment, reduce damages to the environment overall. So we are trying to prevent loss of lives, loss of property, loss of flora, fauna, or any detrimental impact that happens in our daily life. And probably if we can resume our daily life as early as possible, accelerate the resumptions of the normal operation as the case might be. And that is what we are all looking forward to. Objective of emergency plan. What are the objectives? Prevents fatalities and injuries, reduces the damages to the building thereby, and how do we go across with it? That is what is very important and needs to be understood time and again. This is what is pertinent to the environment, accelerate the resumption of normal operation. Potential emergency identification. Although emergencies are normally sudden event, nothing which has been planned for, unwarranted event, probably their occurrence can be predicted. Can we pinpoint the sources of happening or probability of happening at what particular time, at what particular places, with certain degree of probability of certainty. The first step is to find which hazards, both natural or workplace human or otherwise, that poses a threat to a specific workplace event. This can be achieved by conducting emergency preparedness and assessment thereby. Let us talk about the emergency preparedness. And if you look into it, we have fire, we have evacuation plan, we have a threat for bombing, external emergencies or terrorist activities, internal emergencies. Something goes wrong with your electrical system or data system, personal threats or medical emergency as the case might be. So how likely certain situation can arrive or occur in your personal life or professional life? What means are there to available to prevent or mitigate or fight certain situation? What is necessary for given situation? This is very important for you to understand perhaps. So, emergency preparedness assessment. Let us talk about the natural disaster that is waiting to happen or might have happened a number of times in our history altogether. Earthquake being one of the most common thing. Rain, cyclone, subsidence, high wind, temperature extreme. Extreme when I say it can be extremely cold or extremely hot, as the case might be. Flood, fire of natural origin, volcanic eruption, hail, snow, water, landslide, or mud, wind, lightning, as the case might be. Now, how do we talk about the workplace or man-made hazard? I've just spoken about the natural hazard. Now, they can be arson, they can be bomb threat, armed robbery, spilling of flammable liquids or toxic chemicals, exposure of ionizing radiation, electrical failures or malfunction, loss of water supply, machinery breakdown, loss of communication, medical emergencies, pollutions, fire, riots, explosions, sabotage, building collapse, spontaneous combustion, major structural failures, terrorism, as the case might be. So, how do we go about in terms of other example? Let's say there is a trench, or other man-made thing. What are the preparedness that we can go about it? Can we, if there's a trench that collapses down, if there are patients, what are the evacuation plan? If there are power, what are the alternatives or contact with the overhead power? If there are lift emergency, elevator emergency, lost tourist, plant rollover, contact with electricity, white water raft emergencies, and probably fall arrest because of the staircase and things like that. Fall arrest recovery. I am just showing it in your screen is a sample assessment sheet for emergency preparedness where we are talking about the emergency. If you look into it, these are the emergency that we goes around it. What are probability of happening it, possible scenarios, the risk level, is it severe, is it extreme, is it regular, and how do we try to mitigate it? So every emergency plan can be maintained, and this can be done with your workplace location or probable location perhaps. Preparation, ERP or emergency planning committee or EPC, sorry. What do we look into it? Or ECO, emergency control organization. Many government would have these plans or disaster management system places are there altogether. So what are the emergency planning committee, what they're working are all about it, how will they get activated, at what point they get activated, who are the key members who will play the major role in emergency planning committee or emergency control organization? So we need to come up with emergency plans, we need to come up with emergency response procedures, training them, emergency response exercise, review and maintenance. Let us talk about EPC one by one. Now, these are the people who comes up. They are in the normal way of life. They are working, but during emergency, let's say there is somebody called the admin officer in the provincial places or in the national or the federal government, somebody from firefighting, somebody from police, somebody from medical, and so on and so forth. So everybody comes in, pulls in, and they form a emergency planning committee. Membership representative of the workplace may include the members of ECO. EPC responsibility ensures an emergency preparedness assessment is undertaken for each building, structures, workplace, determine hazard which warrants specific procedures. Within the emergency management plan, develop and implement the emergency plan and responses procedure. Determine the number of emergency control organizations personnel. Determine who will conduct firefighting, first aid, environment safety, shutdown procedures, organize emergency control organization personnel. Ensure evacuation exercises are conducted at least once in a year. Review the effectiveness of the evacuation exercise. Arrange improvement where warranted. Monitor the specific procedures and control for the management of the emergencies per se. Now, let us talk about the emergency plan. What are the key requirements that needs to be kept in mind while planning for emergency? Number one should be the size and probably the complexity of the facility or the place. Fire engineering, life safety features of the facility, security system, procedures and protocol, the number and nature of occupants, people occupying that building, sources, places, what are the entry point, how many numbers of exit points are there, what happens if it is a multi-story building. Do we depends only on a regular staircase, only on the elevators or the lifts, or are there emergency staircases available? For a fast evacuation plan, you need to go, if it is a flat building, how do we mitigate it, where are the fire hoses, that needs to be planned, the hours of occupancies, cover times, everything needs to be detailed and pointed out. Consider method of communication. Should it be only a public address system? Should it be there in a multi-story building? How do we go around it? Are there any enough places to display the way towards the exit? What are the fine prints that needs to be taken into consideration? Many a building would have their emergency lighting system, electrical system lit up during only emergency, showing the path to the exit. Consider person with disabilities. What if a person is not normal and they are probably have a disadvantageous position? How to evacuate them? Need to be varied for different circumstances, and it should be kept as simple as normal as in possible in a layman's language. So emergency plan, it should have a clear statement, purpose and scope. Information of the structures and purpose of EPC, emergency planning committee, has to be there. Identification of facilities to which it applies, descriptions of the fire safety and emergency features of the facilities, the organizational arrangement for the facilities, separation sections of the following, let's say the identification of emergencies, the response procedures to the emergency, and the evacuation diagram. The exit route needs to be clearly stated and easily visible, easily understood by a layman. Training arrangement, statement of the extent of distribution of emergency plan, a record of distribution, details of the hours of occupancies, when it is expected to be fully occupied, what are the peak hours, and when people are in less in numbers. Mm, the emergency planning committee nominated validity period for emergency plans, the date of issues, and the amendment date. Just shown you a diagram where evacuation signs have been placed. If you are here, and how do we go around it? If you are somewhere down the corner, is this the way to go out? Absolutely. Probably not waiting to come from this way to this another exit that comes around it. So how do we go around? And that is needs to be taken into our consideration. Response procedures, and these are just a structures, sample structures of emergency plan. Whom are the contact people to be in touch with, economic roles and duties, procedures for specific emergencies, pre-emergencies, emergency including evacuation, post-emergency, evacuation diagram or training schedules and arrangement, other organizational arrangement, system strategies related to emergencies as deemed fit. Now we have the emergency planning committee as an EPC, the overall group who is going to look the execution of emergency preparedness and emergency responses. Then we have the response procedures, information of the emergency coordinating offices, the ECO, information on procedures for occupant, as in the facility occupants are concerned, and evacuation plan for the display. that needs to be taken. These are the minimum requirement for your emergency plan in case of any disaster or emergency happening around it. Let us talk about the response procedure. First and foremost, to be included and documented in black and white, probably displayed, and every person in the building, in the facility should be able to know, should be aware of what are the emergency response procedures. Is all about it. So it's a responsibility and duties of the emergency control organizers. What are the steps that needs to be taken? What are the duties and responsibilities of the occupant? What action they are supposed to take? What are the cases? What instructions has to be given in terms of evacuation? What way, which way to follow around it? Instruction for coordinating the evacuation, the arrangement for emergency preparedness and responsiveness, methods for controlling the alarm, methods for operating firefighting and the equipment, emergency current emergency contact detail, and post emergency action as the case might be. Let us talk about the response procedures. Consider after hours, evacuation routes, person with disabilities, lifts and escalator, accounting for people, assembly areas, receptionists, switchboard operators, flow, area marshalling, restriction of vehicles movement as the case might be, control and coordination, communication, first aid personnel, emergency response equipment, lift safety features, security guard, specialist staff, and other consideration as the case might be. Now, these are the things that needs to be taken into consideration. What are my response procedures after the event, before the event, during the event? Which all ways to act, probably react in terms of evacuation, in terms of first aid, in terms of machinery that needs to be used, for example, lifts, elevators, where are the people to be assembled, and so on and so forth. Now, these are my response procedures thereby. ECO or Eco Emergency Control Organization's number of member depends on the size of the organization. Essentially includes the chief warden, the admin officer, the communication officer, the flows on area wardens and deputies, everybody responsible are right from supervisory level to the top man for the emergency control organization. Emergency response procedures include roles and responsibilities during emergencies, instructions given by the emergency organizations, control, personnel shall take up precedence over the normal management of the structure. So, what are ECO? Emergency Control Organization. We have the wardens who is the heading the thing. Now, they they can be recognized by, let's say, certain attire that they wear. Usually, in a production facility, they have a helmet which shows their job roles, expectations. So, one who is wearing a white helmet is warden. He is either the person who makes things moving or probably is responsible for the everything within that area. Then we have the yellow helmet, which means the floor area, floor warden, the area supervisors, and so on and so forth. The red warden are the warden who is the person who is the first line managers actually seeing the execution of the emergency responses thing. And the white helmet with a green cross is for the medical personnel as the case might be. This is the medical personnel that needs to be taken into. There are other ways to identify themselves. For example, armbands. Various different organizations would have an armband, helmet, caps, uniforms. So training. What do we need to train them? First and foremost, the evacuation plan. Second, what are the alarm system and how do we sensitize the other people? If I have encountered an emergency and I think it puts everybody in the facilities in danger, I should be the first one to ring in the emergency. And how do we go around it? Ring in the alarm system. Reporting procedures for the personnel, shutdown procedures, types of potential emergencies, specialist training. When initially when the plan is developed for new employees, when new equipment, materials, processes are introduced, when procedures have been updated or revised, what exercise shows the employee performance must be improved at least annually. And we'll talk about the annual emergency equipment facilities and alarm. They are reporting systems, emergency reporting, what happened, to whom it needs to be reported, alerting everyone within the vicinity. If I have encountered an emergency which puts everybody in the facility at risk, I should be the one who first should ring in the alarm system, the alerting system, emergency intercommunication, how need to be communicated, and EWIS, emergency warning and intercommunication system, has been shown out in the pic. So equipment and facilities, let's quickly go around it. In terms of fire, we can have fire extinguisher, fire blanket, hose reels, sprinkler system, smoke alarm, smoke extraction system, stairwell pressurization, smoke doors, smoke barriers, fire compartment. In terms of hazardous material, let's say talk about gas detectors, self-contained breathing apparatus, spill kits, splash suits and coveralls, specialized alarms, automatic closing doors and atmospheric extraction, specialized personal protection equipment, emergency showers, eye washers, everything that comes around with hazardous materials, any spillage of chemical if you want to go around it. In general, we have the depiction that has been mentioned out here. We have to have a personal protective equipment, PPE, emergency barrier tape, signs, gloves, enclosed footwear, safety glasses, fire control panels, manual alarm, and so on. In terms of fire first aid, we should have the kits, we should have the automatic defibrillators, eye washers, shower equipment, first aid room, separate circulated. Now, what happened post emergency? Remember, once emergency has happened, once emergency had was happening, and once emergency have already happened, doesn't mean everything has been taken care of. Post emergency is the most important thing because we need to take lessons from every emergency, everything. So we need to understand what could have been bettered, how things could have been handled in a proper fashion. So we need to debrief with the personnel involved, review and use of the equipment, identify equipment used, report the use of equipment, record the use of equipment, report any losses, anything that gets damaged in terms of persons, in terms of equipment, report any equipment that needs to be required to be replaced, services, used equipment, ensure all equipment is in a steady state. Did I say recovery from emergencies are to be controlled does not mean that we are back into the business as usual, as we are coming with a daily life. We should always have an understanding of what caused that emergency, what caused that hazard, how to mitigate that emergencies or disaster, how to react in a proper fashion, how to react perhaps which will have a minimized impact on our daily life, on a usual schedule. This may take little longer, might be become a little more complex. Then to control emergency itself, so recovery is very important. Emergency plan evaluation review drills, we should be having it once in a year. Absolutely, yes. What happens, how do we go around it, so everybody is aware what role they are expected to play. Last but not the least is the review and maintenance of the emergency, the assessment, ensuring that all equipments are right, proper, and are as effective as it can be. We need to review the emergency plans, the procedures, thereby conduct a maintenance and inspection of all emergency facilities. Every equipment required for legislation standards or by manufacturing instruction, and we should have an emergency facility and equipment in internal uh, inspection regime time to time, every quarter, if not in every month. With this, we come to an end of this presentation. Thank you for watching this video till the very end.